Hey everybody, we want to welcome you to the joint meeting between the Milliken Town Board and the RE5J School District. On our agenda tonight, we have introductions. We'll start with, I want to talk a little bit about truancy. I believe Shannon has a presentation regarding cash in lieu. I want to talk a little bit about Milliken Middle School and probably the high school. Does anybody have anything else they want to talk about?
I'd like to hear what's happening at MES also.
Okay, put that on the agenda. So, first want to start with welcoming Heather back. How old is baby Logan now?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 weeks, and she shows up for a board meeting.
2 weeks today, right?
2 weeks today.
Yeah, so congratulations to Matt and Heather on their arrival, and no, they're not getting any sleep. So, why don't we go around the room, introduce ourselves so we all know each other. I'm Elizabeth Austin, the mayor of Milliken.
I'm Monica Johnson. I'm the newest member of the school board, and I have to apologize. I do have to leave a little early tonight for mom duties, so when I sneak out, don't be offended.
I'm Amanda Proctor. I'm on the school board. I represent District C, which is Milliken and Monroe KQ.
I'm Brian Lane. I'm a trustee as of last April, so not quite a year.
Linda Biesner, I'm trustee.
Michael Everest, I'm the CFO for the school district.
Karen Tressler, superintendent for the school district.
Jeremy Scott, member of the school board and treasurer.
I'm Shannon Bingham. I'm the school district's planning contractor.
Nate Sassano, I'm the vice president of the school board.
Michael Wales, I'm on board of education.
Heather Beckman, trustee.
Dan Dean, trustee.
Peggy Wakeman, trustee.
And online somewhere, can't see it now, but we should have Mayor Pro Tem Leron Ehrlich. Is he with us?
He was, and he just...
Disappeared. All right, well, maybe he'll come back. I did tell him that I would hold my phone out in case he couldn't hear, but I guess I did not. Okay, what subject would you like to start with first? We'll start with truancy. How's that? Fun topic.
I guess it's, yeah, it's my corner.
Nothing from Libra. All right, just to get everybody on a level playing field, our community court manager, Sylvia Martinez, has been holding truancy sessions. We had the first one in December, and the second one was last Saturday. So the first one, a little rough start. We came back to Karen and let her know that we needed support from the school there. So Casey Ross did show up. I think he was quite surprised by the presentation as a whole. Cheryl worked with Sylvia on reformatting some of the information. I think it was very well done, very well received. We have a new tracking sheet that we're going to be using to see what is the effectiveness. I will say that Casey was pretty effective at communicating if they don't get on track with truancy, what can happen. It seemed to be a little eye-opening for them. And we have some residents that show up as community representation. And so they had some pretty good input that I think it made the kids more aware. I do like to show up for those. I certainly enjoy talking with the kids. And, you know, I always like to ask, what classes are you missing? Well, it seems that they don't like science. I'm not sure why. So I wanted to take a look at you guys do these testing of the kids, and I see that we've got like 57 out of 100 points. But interestingly enough, on the total records, you know, we've got like 2,600 records for English and math, and only 909 for science. Is testing optional? I guess that was my first question. Can they not take
What do
these
you mean
tests?
testing? The state testing?
Yeah, the
Or
state testing.
Parents are able to opt out of the test. And so
Really?
we're working hard to educate parents that it's critical, that we need to find out what their student excels in and what they need some support on, and we need them to take the test. In fact, we talked about it at the last board meeting,
Mm-hmm.
in that bringing it up to date with, this is important, we use the data, and it will help you as a parent as well. Parents are able to come in and sign off should they want their student to opt out. We also then don't get a score on it from the State Department, and it goes against us. So we
Yeah.
want them to take the
Are
test.
they anonymous scores, or are they like, or are the kids affected by their scoring? So like if a kid doesn't do well, are they affected personally, or is it kind
No,
of
we hope to
anonymous?
support them with whatever their deficiencies are.
Yeah.
It's not reflected in their grades or
Yeah.
anything.
No. Yeah.
Well, so I keep trying to bring things back full circle and speaking with some of the kids. I know the first truancy class, we had a young man who wanted to be a barber and he hated health, science, and whatever. And we're like, you know, when you got somebody in front of you that's got head lice, you don't take health. And, you know, how are you going to mix the chemicals to dye people's hair? And he was astounded. And I'm just wondering if you know why kids don't like sciences. Are we not taking them out in the field and blowing things up? And I mean, we did things like that when I was in school. We did. Oh, come. We did experiments. We didn't stand close, and they did, you know, things in the field, and it was very interesting.
No,
Jim,
we're
you know why?
still blowing, excuse me, still blowing things up. You know, and that's a good point in the analogy you gave with the student and what he wanted to do with his career, and how does that align with you know, what we would consider basic educational coursing.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of the career and technical education that we're rolling out. It also goes to the project-based learning stuff that we're doing, even starting at the elementary school level.
Mm-hmm.
So a student with the project-based learning will be given a project, and I'm trying to, Reverend Scott's daughter did one 2 years or last year.
Last year.
And you could probably speak a little better to this, but you know, say the project-based learning is, you know, all about cheetahs. And so the student they can't rely on the teacher to provide them resources. They have to go find those resources to create this whole project. And that may involve, you know, doing some animal science work. That may involve reading about zoology. That may involve geography. So we understand where that animal is. I mean, it tries to encompass all of those basics that some kids kind of like to dodge. Me personally, when I was in school, I hated math. I just couldn't do math. But I knew I wanted to do something in engineering. And so the project-based learning really helps that, because I got that when I got to college. They're like, well, if you want to do this,
Yeah.
you got to know trigonometry, or you need to know the calculus. And I finally, okay, I get that application. And so it's not widespread through all the grade levels, but you know, that every year we're bringing more and more of those things online, as far as the project-based learning, the CTE stuff, so that the kids are making those connections with, you know, this is what I want to do for a living. Now I need the tools to make that happen, and oh crap, math is part of that, or oh shoot, I got to do social studies to figure that piece out. So.
Yeah, because to bring it full circle, one of the other things that, you know, we talk about is the fact that these kids are now behind. They've missed many classes, they're now behind. How do they catch up? And recovery credit, is that what it's called?
Credit recovery is one way, in that it's a computer lab-based format in one of the classrooms run by some staffing. We just now are going to be doubling that staffing in order to better meet those kids' needs and also to find out what, looking at the kids overall, what some of background and stuff and how. So we're adding on to that as of probably in the next few weeks in order to get the kids the individualized attention. In that for the child that hates science, there's another one who loves it.
Yeah.
One of our most popular classes is construction. And it's always one that we have too many kids and not enough teacher power. And it's trying to find the balance and finding the teachers that also understand, well, you need math to do this, or you need science to do this in order to go into the construction business. So we're getting there.
Well, we do have a library that has 3 computers in it, maybe 4. Are there 4 or 3? There's 3. Why not ask the expert who's sitting right here? Thank you. You know, sometimes I think kids have just enough of being in a classroom, and maybe if they want to use the computers in the library to do credit recovery. Sylvia is on that side of the town hall now, and so maybe we can set up something so that they can do some classes in there. We think that this truancy program is going to work. We think it's going to save the school board some money, because certainly then you don't have to go through the teachers trying to catch the kids up if they're actually in class. And I understand that if they miss a certain amount, then it goes to your attorney, isn't it? Did I get that right?
That would be truancy court by state law. We would then, in fact, Mr. Ross went today to court on one of our students.
Okay, so I think we'd kind of like to avoid that. What we see right now that could be a stumbling block and an issue is Milliken taxpayers are paying for this right now. What is the openness to help fund this program?
For the truancy
for the truancy program, yes. You think there's an opening to help us out with
I need to find out what the costs are and what you're doing on the Saturdays.
Okay.
And finding out what the fiscal impact is of that.
Well, I think Cheryl can pull some of those numbers and get with you.
Okay, that sounds good.
Maybe you guys can discuss it, because for the people that run the class, I believe, don't quote me on this, the training was like $500 each, because we just don't put somebody there in to talk to the kids. They have to know what to say, what not to say, so that we're encouraging the kids to go back to school, not, trying to beat them over the head. And so there's that, and then of course there's Sylvia's salary, and then just a few other things. I don't mind supplying the snacks that they got, so I don't have a problem with that.
Are those the individuals who be working with the students? Are they from the community, or are they from outside?
So there's a professional trainer. The people that Sylvia brings in, I think I'm okay in throwing it out there. One of the primary people that's always concerned with our community and heavily involved is Scott Nix, because as you may know, that he fosters children. He can readily speak to, if you don't go to school, I can tell you what's going to happen. He has a great way of communicating with the kids, and he talks about from his own personal experience when he didn't like school, and he's been through this training, so he is well acclimated for that. Sylvia has brought in some other resources. She brought in a young man to this last one who was great. He talked about the embarrassment of not walking with the rest of his class. He graduated late, and he had to work harder. He was the only one that didn't graduate on time in his family, and now he's actually just moved up to be a manager in a restaurant. So she's bringing in these success stories. Even a young lady who is now getting her master's in biology. People that live right here in Milliken, so it's very relatable to them, and so that the children can see that, okay, I'm behind, because we had 2 freshmen that one of them sat right there and said, I'm not going to graduate on time now. And I'm thinking, you're a freshman. You know, you might be a little bit behind, but surely we could catch you up by the time you're a senior.
Right, and with summer school as well.
It's that defeated behavior. It's like, no, we're going to see what we can do for you. Excuse me. English class. But it just very relatable. Somebody who got a chance to go to community court because they didn't go to school. So wide variety of experiences. And Cheryl pointed out to me, you know, when Casey was speaking about consequences, we see one of the parents lean over and go, the kid sat up, paid attention. So it's interesting to watch.
Mm-hmm.
It really is, and participating.
Yeah, and just to feed off of that, I think it was very impactful. And it was really interesting because I sat in one of because they formed circles. And so we had 2 youth and their parents. And these kids were very honest as to why they weren't going to class. And the parents were very honest with, you know, how they felt about that happening. And so it gave space for kids to be able to feel safe to say why, and the parents to feel safe to say the impact it was having on their family and the concern they have for that child's future. So, you know, if we can stop these kids at that point from continuing that behavior, you know, I was impressed. I have to tell you, I didn't know what to expect. You know, it impressed me very much, and I plan on attending. We're hoping to have one once a month, and I want to be there. I want to hear these stories. I want to see, you know, and like Elizabeth said, Casey telling them the consequences. You know, if you showed up here today, this is the bonus. If you continue to keep missing classes, this is what's going to happen. And after that happens, this can happen, and so on. And I watched the parents' eyes get huge, and Elizabeth, you know, one was like, "Wake up, kid! Are you listening?" And it was good. It was a good session, I think, and I think it's a good program.
You have to be prepared when you come into these, though, and you know, I believe it or not, just if somebody find this interesting, I keep my mouth shut mostly. Listen, a lot of parents, both this time and last time, brought to tears. Mm-hmm. Then, of course, it makes me irritated because I know of one kid and his mother that was supposed to be there and called him 9 o'clock, "Hey, where are you?" Of course, we got a lame excuse for that one. So I think that the parents who care, they're showing up, they're participating, and I think maybe we can get some of these kids back on track. There were a couple from the first session that have exited the school building. They are now on homeschool.
You had 4 of our students, correct? Were there 4? Okay.
In this last time.
In this
the
last
time
session.
before, yeah.
Okay.
So we want to do some follow-up tracking 30, 60, 90 days out and make sure that they're returning to school.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Is this just community volunteers that volunteer their time after they go through the training?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Everybody that shows up there, except Sylvia, because this is part of her community court manager, and it's part of our IGA to run truancy. And you know, we're happy to do it if it has an impact, and if we can help get some support for this. You know, because when they're not in school, well, what are they doing? Some of them are in the cafeteria commons, and others are out doing some sort of destruction around town, I'm sure. So, any questions, concerns, comments?
I think part of the problem with it is the cost of the program for our town to run, for the number of kids that are benefited. If you know, we can't spend enough money per child if we save a child, but we have to be realistic about what our taxpayers will be comfortable with too.
Yeah. And on truancy?
I say thank you for hosting those and facilitate.
You really should come in, it's fun.
Yeah, if you can send us dates. I'd love to attend.
Sure.
It's a subject matter that's close to my heart. Karen knows Karen and I try to meet on every Friday. I'm always talking about credit recovery and what we can do for those kids. So yeah, I'd love to come see it.
That was something we talked about after the first one, was really, having people from the school district really there, because nobody was in the first one, which, maybe you didn't know, and that's totally fine, but showing that the school actually cares.
Right.
That you guys aren't there, these kids aren't there, right? And that there are adults that are watching out and seeing that you guys aren't there, and we do care, and we do want you guys to be there. So, I think that would be really, really key to have that happen in the future. So.
Okay. All right. Truancy. Done. Next item. What would you like to talk about?
Since Shannon came from Alaska, shall we have Shannon present?
Sure.
Did you come from Alaska?
I came from Poncha Springs.
Oh.
But I have a truancy story.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, I did a ride along with Boulder Valley School District's truancy officer one afternoon. This was in 1987, and this guy's name was Dave. And he used to drive this really cool kind of yellow Volkswagen Beetle. And we drove up next to this kid that was walking down the street about 6 blocks from Boulder High School. We pulled up next to him. "What you doing?" "I'm just walking." And "Where are you going?" "I don't know." "Why aren't you in class?" "Had a fight with my girlfriend." So we did some romance counseling there. Kid got in the back of the Volkswagen. We took him back to Boulder High School and put him back in class. That was probably the lowest impact truancy event in history. But yeah, that's my little truancy story.
Well, they're probably married and lived happily ever after.
Probably worked out perfectly. I'm sure our advice was critical. Would you like me to start? Or?
Mm-hmm.
So my name is Shannon Bingham. I'm a school planner. I work all over Colorado, Washington State, and Alaska doing capital planning for school districts and stakeholder process and facility issues, boundary issues, things of that nature. And I started working in Academy School District 20 in 1985, and the first project I did was to update the land dedication and fee in lieu of land dedication values between that school district and El Paso County. That was my first project. So I have done these things off and on for, well, there's some complex math there, like 38 years. So they've been around for a long time. I would say we've gotten to the point where most of the districts up and down the Front Range, I'd say probably 80% of the districts up and down the Front Range have land dedication and fee in lieu of land dedication. A lot of the districts have had the same values for 35 years. In fact, I got a call from a district in El Paso County that wanted to update their rates. And I said, well, do you have the report that the original rates were based on? They said, yeah, I got it right here. I said, well, what are the amounts? And the amounts sounded familiar. I said, well, what's it say on the bottom of, oh, there's your name on the bottom of the report, 1986. So a lot of districts haven't updated, a lot of districts have. So I've been instrumental working with a couple of 2 or 3 school law firms in helping about 20 districts either adopt fees or update their fees. There are a lot of fees in Weld County in place right now. We have about, I'd say 6 districts that have an average fee of right around $2,400. Windsor School District has the highest fees at $2,914, and they just asked me to do an update, and they went up to, or proposing to go up to about $3,300 for a single family house. And then Greeley 6 just asked me to update their values as well, and they're currently at about $2,400 per unit. A lot has happened in the whole school construction business during the last 36 to 48 months. Costs have just gone astronomical. It now costs about $720 per square foot to build an institutional building, meaning a school. And if you think about it, and you lay $700 bills on the table, that's about a square foot. So it's gotten to the point to where just about the capital cost of a school could pretty much be lay $100 bills down on the whole floor surface of the school, and there's the cost of the school. It's affecting everybody. I'm building a house in Poncha Springs, and everything just goes up quarterly. Steel goes up. The concrete guy calls me and says, hey, next time you order a concrete pour for this little house that you're building, it's going to be 20% more. People are telling me you should have bought lumber back in certain time before it goes up. Now we're moderated a little bit. So a lot of things are changing, and most of the districts that are renegotiating their fees or increasing them are doing it based on cost. Way back when, we were calculating the fee based on just raw land, meaning a cornfield or a grain sorghum field or an alfalfa field, just raw land. And a lot of districts started having bond elections and having real trouble covering their cost of getting sites, because then they had to get water, they had to get sewer, they had to build street frontage, they had to get gas, electric, and broadband to the sites. And then a lot of the sites that we were given were pretty lumpy, and they needed some sort of significant overlot grading. So starting about 15 years ago, most of the districts have switched over to asking for developed land cost, meaning a site that's not necessarily shovel ready, but closer to being ready to build a school on than what we've had in the past. So I would say that the 20 districts that have fairly updated fees, I would say almost all of those have been recalculated based on this developed land cost amount. We're in a downturn right now because of interest rates. So probably the second week of October, we had this huge interest rate crisis, and now interest rates, I think I checked yesterday, for a 30-year fixed for right at about 7%. So what it costs to buy a house now is pretty high, and that has reduced home sales volume all over the western U.S. and Alaska, and I don't know what's happening east of the Mississippi, but everybody's down about 2/3. So everybody's sitting with about 1/3 of the sales volume that they had 6 months ago, and it's slowly moderating back up. Now Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are saying this is going to last another 18 months, which is kind of apropos when you think about it. It'll get fixed right before the election. So I'm doing all of my forecasting for school districts based upon this slower housing market, and then in about May of 2024, we're going to drop back down to a 3.5% interest rate environment. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are showing they're thinking about the same curve as far as how long it's going to take for everything to fix itself. However, in school districts like this one, where we have a huge amount of residential growth on the books, both with Lot Holdings and with other developments here in Milliken and with our new development up north, we are trying to avoid missing out on collecting fees associated with that stuff building. Also over in Johnstown, we have 6 or 7 big developers that are building lot inventory right now like there's no tomorrow, in anticipation of the interest rate problem being cleaned up in early 2024 and us going back to kind of a boom town environment for residential sales. That's happening all over the state. So I work in south end of El Paso County, I work for Elizabeth, I work for Douglas County Schools, I work for Johnstown Milliken, I work for Salida, I work for 5 big Weld County schools. And I work for 5 districts over on the western slope, including Parachute, Grand Junction, Rose, a couple of others. And everyone is trying to get these fee systems in place so that when we have these boom times, we're able to collect money to help us buy land. So the intent of these fee systems has always been to buy land, because school districts get themselves in trouble on buying land by not having enough resources available to do that whenever they bond for a building. Some put land in their bond elections, but not all. And when you put land in a bond election, you've already predetermined your site, and that can have some political ramifications if your community isn't completely unified on where to put a school. That happens all over the West. So these fee in lieu and land dedication ordinances have been really helpful for the districts that have a big land development. A lot of times they'll get a whole elementary school site. So I'm working over in Kingsburg and Loch Bowie right now, and we just negotiated 3 big school sites with a big developer over there, and they're going to give us a high school site and 2 K-8 sites. And that was within their allocation of what they would owe according to this fee system. Other districts have a lot of smaller developers. So up in Chaffey County, we have our biggest developers have maybe 80 lots. Or the builder might buy 80 lots. And so that's not going to be enough lots to create a whole school site. So we have them pay a fee so that Salida School District can go out and buy a site. That site will probably be in Poncha Springs, but the assessment is for the whole school district. We're going to crowd Longfellow School, which is the elementary school in Salida, until it's bursting at the seams, and then we'll build a second school in Poncha Springs on a piece of land that we used using our fee revenue. So that's kind of a little bit of a big picture of how all of that works. I have a slide presentation I could show a little bit of that would give you a little bit of a picture of our demographics. Our birth rate has risen and stabilized. We're doing really well right now as far as having a nice stable influx, and our growth is going to be coming from residential housing predominantly. In Milliken specifically, we've hit a plateau and we're trailing off just a little bit. But for the most part, we have more babies being born within the catchment area than we've ever had. So, yeah, thanks, congratulations, another customer. So things are going very well with child production for us. Here's what Freddie Mac is saying about interest rates. Basically, they say that the difference between a 3.5% loan and a 7% loan cuts almost half of the potential buyers out of the housing market. They're also saying that by late 2023, we're probably going to hit 5.1%, and then when we turn over into 2024, we'll probably land into the mid-4s, and then through the spring of that year, I'm expecting interest rates to slide back down. So now is a great time to buy a house if you have the financial wherewithal to wait 18 months and refinance it later. Because a lot of the builders and developers are offering $50,000 to $80,000 discounts on houses right now. Our enrollment forecast shows for Milliken Elementary, we'll get up to about 620 by 2030, which is, believe it or not, right around the corner. The new building, as it's currently being updated and renovated, will hold 450 children. So that means that we'll have to split into a second building. So our facility needs here in Milliken are significant at the elementary level. We will also start running out of middle and high school seats in about 10 years. So we will continue to need to ask our community to help us pay for school facilities. These are some of the developments that we have in town. I can't see that very well from across the room. It's not on my screen, but you can see Brookstone Townhomes is going great guns right now and doing really, really well. That's a very well-managed townhouse development. I don't know how interest rates are affecting her. I haven't spoken with her recently. But the people in the room could probably tell us how sales are going based on building permit and certificate of occupancy volume. Here is kind of some breakdown of some of the lot holdings, big parcels that we expect to come online during the next 20 and 30 years. So again, this whole FOMO thing, fear of missing out, we've got all of this development potential in the town of Milliken. And what we're suggesting is if we could do this, this fee update for Milliken, that would allow us to collect significantly more funding than we do now, and it would allow us to establish a kitty to buy sites in the right places as the community continues to develop. Again, just more with Brookstone Townhomes and some of the great work that Windmill is doing to put what are really some of the most affordable homes on the Front Range, and they're very high quality. So doing a really nice job. And everything that's happening in the lot holdings properties is incredibly appealing, given some of the $850,000 houses I'm looking at as being proposed as family grade housing down in Douglas County. Your dollar will buy a lot in the Milliken community, and we expect that to continue to attract a significant number of families to this community because of the high quality, affordable housing in a variety of densities that's available here. This is just some kind of arcane calculation of how many kids we would get from all of this, but I'm forecasting that we'll get another 230 elementary kids during the next 8 years there, and another 125 middle and high school roughly. And again, I can't see that from my seat here. This is just a slide that talks about that kind of difference between when you ask for a site, a land parcel, we really need 10 to 12 and a half acres. So if a development isn't big enough in the formula to create the need for a whole school site, we tend to take the fee, and then we put all those resources together and buy a site big enough to accommodate schools. These are generic standards that I use all over the state. Our standards are on another slide that I'll show you in just a second. This is kind of the methodology that I use: cost per acre, the number of acres we need for a school, the number of students that are in a school, and then the number of students that we get from a housing unit. I think we get about 0.6 of a child from every single family detached house. We get more kids from mobile homes. I would say the leading family housing type in the state of Colorado by far is mobile homes, modular homes, and manufactured housing. That has done more to address the needs of families than anything. We are proposing that we calculate the yield from those units at the same value that we would get from a single family detached unit. This talks about that my little sermon on developed land versus raw land. School districts, we can't do anything with raw land except spend money on it. So basically, we have to trench, we have to build streets, we have to dig for water and sewer, we have to establish other urban infrastructure. So I think 3 of the districts I work with, Aurora is a good example. They have a city ordinance that says developers must give developed land or land that would be appraised as though it were developed. So my formula for calculating that is based on what we spent at Elwell, what we spent at Roosevelt High School, and what we spent at Toyton K-8, the engineering academy up in Greeley. So these are all fresh samples that are within 18 months old. So we're trying to use more contemporary cost data in order to stay as up to speed as possible to that $720 per square foot. Well, that's not what the developed land costs, but there are costs in that developed land that wind up being about $171 per acre. And I go out and find 10 to 12 comparable sales in RE5J, and I say, well, this is what an average acre of cornfield would cost. And then we add all those engineering costs on top of that to figure out what would a developed acre cost us. So if you drive out the highway here, out 60, and on the left, you'll see all of this scraping going on right before you get to the interstate. That's what I'm talking about, this urban infrastructure stuff. They're building lot inventory in those new subdivisions and for that big box stuff there. And all of that earth moving, all of that heavy equipment, all of that installation of all that PVC pipe, that's incredibly expensive. So the majority of the districts that have these fee systems have tried to integrate that cost into their formula, and that's what we're proposing as part of the update of the fee here in Milliken, would be to be on a par with what everybody else is doing. Now, I talked to a lot of developers about how they feel about these fees. A lot of these developers work here, they work in Phoenix, and they work in Southern California. And their fee basis in Arizona and in Southern California is way higher than it is here. So they tend to enter into these land dedication fee in lieu conversations with a big smile on their faces because it's way less than what they're paying elsewhere. But they're kind of used to it. And their message to most of us in the school district community is that as long as I'm paying about the same fee that my competitor 2 miles over there is paying, I'm fine with the fee. So that's been the messaging that we've gotten back from most of the development community. Now that's what they're telling us. I don't know how they really feel about it, but that's what they have said to us is how they feel about it. As long as there's parity regionally with competitors, that they're okay with paying the fee. And schools sell houses, so they really want these school sites in the developments or close to their developments because it makes their lot inventory and their sold their spec units and whatever their builders are constructing move a lot quicker. So that's been their response to it. Impact fees for sticks and bricks construction of like Elwell or Roosevelt are not legal in the state of Colorado. There is no enabling legislation that facilitates that. So it's not an impact fee. It's land dedication and fee in lieu of land dedication. And I was an expert witness way back in the early 90s where we were trying to get impact fees in the state of Colorado, and the Supreme Court kind of gave us a thumbs down on that. So it's been 30 years that we have kind of come to grips that we don't have impact fees in Colorado for school buildings, but we do have this land dedication and fee in lieu, and there's a difference. Here's just a summary table of what everybody else is collecting. You'll see some highs and some lows, but an average. And this is now old. This I did for Bennett School District, who actually adopted about a $2,400 fee. And these averages, I think, we're running $2,200. I can't read what that says on the bottom. But this was a set of samples that were contemporary 18 months ago when Bennett adopted fees. Here are the acreage proposals for us. Those are so fractional that it's kind of hard to get your head around it. But you'll see our preferred school sizes and our preferred site acreages there. And then on this table, you'll see our single-family detached fee, a single-family attached, which is pretty much townhouses and condominiums, and then a fee for apartments that's way significantly lower. There's not a whole lot of trailer park construction happening in the state right now, which frustrates me because that's such a desirable option for families, but we would assess those at that same fee that you see on the top there. Is that $26.33? Is that what that says?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the fee that we would like the town of Milliken to collect on our behalf. And so the governance and the technicalities of how all of that works varies from school district to school district. My advice to myself is always stay out of it and just do the methodology and then turn that over to the municipal boards, the school boards, and their respective legal advisors to figure out the mechanics of how all of that works. Because there are 3 or 4 different ways that it works. Some, the money goes directly to the district, which is what 27J School District does. They collect the fee directly themselves. A lot of other communities, the city collects the district on behalf of the city collects the fee on behalf of the district and puts it in an account for the district to access. And then there are a couple of other situations as well.
This is for new home construction only, right?
New home construction only, has nothing to do with resales. If you buy a home in a mobile home park, there's no fee associated with that. It's just new mobile home park development and new single-family detached, new apartments, new townhouses, new condos. It's the inception of the dwelling unit. So, for example, in Chaffee County, I expect to pay Salida School District a fee for the house that I'm building now once I get a certificate of occupancy. So that'll come out of my pocket as an individual homeowner. The builders are paying their fees maybe 23, 25 lots at a time if they're paying it at preliminary plat, and then in other cases, they're paying it when the units are sold or when the building term, the certificate of occupancy is issued. So it just varies when it's collected, who collects it. All of those details are different.
And this is just to buy the land. This is just to buy the land to put the school on, correct?
That's the primary intent of the funding. The use of it has varied across the state, but I would say the lion's share of the land development fee in lieu has been to buy land for school sites.
Yeah, but RE5J hasn't used cash in lieu to buy school sites. Are you still paying on those modulars that you use cash in lieu for out at the high school? Still paying on those?
We received those at no charge. We had to pay the infrastructure on them.
Then it must have been the infrastructure it was used on. It was 1.8 million?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So are we still paying on that, or is that complete?
Those have been paid
Should
off.
be paid off.
That's been paid off? Okay.
I might add that I can think of 5 situations where districts have paid for portables or infrastructure out of fee revenue. I can think of another 5 situations where districts had facility emergencies, where they had kids they couldn't house, they had a snow damaged structure, they had a fire damaged structure, they had a security breach that had to be immediately repaired in order to keep kids safe. And when they have no other alternative, in a lot of cases, but again, it's a minority of what the intent of the funding is. They have used some of their fee revenue to pay for those kind of problems when they crop up.
I believe our IGA between the 2 entities says that we can use that money for land or for classroom space. Something to that effect. I don't remember the exact terminology, but it's
Capital improvements.
Yeah.
Is
It's
what
got
it says.
to add learning space.
Add space, right.
Yeah, it's got to add capacity.
Right.
But currently, we haven't used cash in lieu.
We haven't used cash in lieu since, I believe, 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're holding on
The
to
fund
it.
was taken down to 0 in 2018, when it was used to renovate the stadium at Roosevelt High School and new scoreboard.
I think that was before, but yeah. That was also.
It was before you guys. It was Dr. Foster that did that. Yeah.
I will hold my thoughts back.
Well,
but yeah,
and just some history on that. That wasn't a pet project. That was there was an ADA violation that
Yeah.
that had to be addressed, and that, as Shannon said, I mean, that kind of brought it to an emergency level where,
The concession stands?
well, it was all part of the whole thing. I mean, there was issues with the slope and grade that was going to the concession stand that had to be addressed.
And scoreboard.
I don't know if the scoreboard was part of that.
Oh, it is in the documentation. Yeah.
Okay.
So, but currently we don't,
So-
I mean, we know there's building coming, and we know we might have to either buy land or prepare land, because even when we get land donated, which is great, some of the costs associated with making this something we can build on can be rather tremendous, so that's the.
I was under the
practice
impression
currently.
when you went for a bond that you included all that infrastructure that you just talked about, all the development in that bond. You don't put that in there? That grading cost?
Again, it varies, but little districts that are being very growth impacted, like I'm working for 3 right now, that putting a fully developed site in a bond package would be a big deal for them, given their bonding capacity. So pretty much the districts that are collecting fees are trying to get a developed land fee so that they're not getting cornfield, basically. And
But in this last bond, yeah, I mean, that's how we've been paying for all the development we've had to do in this bond is with bond proceeds. This was a big enough bond, we could do it, but the next ones are probably going to be smaller because it's going to be one or two projects. So it'd be nice to, anything we could do in cash and lieu as long as we have to ask for a bond, when we get to that point.
And apply the bond dollar to the actual physical building as opposed to a pipe in the ground.
How does this requested increase compare with our surrounding districts? Are we low, are we middle, are we at the top of the barrel?
we're right in the sweet spot. Greeley 6 and Windsor 4 will be have higher fees after I recalculate the fee for the town of Evans and the town of Greeley. They'll have a higher fee just because costs have gone so nuts. And vacant land is more expensive over there. Raw land is more expensive, closer to Greeley. But we'll be right in the middle of the paddock. So what we're asking for is to be average, basically.
Goal is to be average.
Go from 1,292, I think, to 2,633. Is that where we could go?
Our heart rate is 924.
Oh, 924. I
So
thought
it
we
goes
got
up
to 1,200.
$1,700.
Okay. It's quite a jump. It's a little hard to sell that to Brett Hall when he's offered the school district property before that you've declined. And now we're going to raise his cash in lieu, which raises the cost of his houses.
Is that 924 that currently is in place, is that developed land price or raw land price?
It's an old figure, and I looked back at it, and a former business partner of mine developed it, and it didn't really include the full spectrum of infrastructure costs, meaning I think it just had water, sewer, and street frontage in it. And the figures that it was based on were 8 years old, I think. Because I was using those same figures 8 years ago, back when you could build a school for $325 a square foot. So, but that was the basis of it, is that those figures were indeed developed land cost figures, but they were 8 years old.
Well,
When was our current fee set?
Pardon me?
When was our current fee set?
Leslie Arnold said.
2018.
2018.
Yeah, long ago, those fairs.
Yeah.
So it's $750 for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, there's a small increase. Yeah.
But the cost estimates for that had been on the shelf for a while. So that's what I'm suggesting, is that those were probably, the cost estimates were 8 years old at least.
Okay, so 2010.
How long is it going to be before you build another school here in Milliken?
Well, to build another one, we've got Milliken in another year, when our middle schoolers will be moving into the renovated high school. There will be a building there that we anticipate, that'll be past me, but it's something that we're looking at in the future as to what type of school it will be and what grade levels it will be.
Okay, but you don't have the money to effectively run it when it moves out for a while. When will you have money to run that school? You would come into the task force and say there would be a very tight budget to run Milliken Middle School along with the schools in Johnstown.
Yeah, with our current count. I mean, the building comes when the kids come. I mean, that's just kind of how it works. I mean, when it comes to like all the operations of the building, I mean, that's all tied to the money that comes with the kiddos. So it's hard to say when. I mean, we can use the projection numbers to say, well, you know, and that was a conversation we had. You know, I mean, we could put a date on it, but that's assuming the growth happens in the way that we're anticipating it happening. So
do you think it's 2025 when you'll be able to operate Milliken Middle School as a school?
I like to count, and I don't know what projections you do, but I usually do 25% above what the school capacity is before we figure out how we can efficiently open a new building with the operating costs. But some of the kids, some of the teachers and kids will go to the new building, but it's some of your new operating costs, heat, light, utility bills, staff that you need at the building, such as a principal and a secretary of maintenance. Mm-hmm. Those are the ones that you need to make sure you plan efficiently in order to open, and in order to make sure that you are asking voters also to be, that we're being as fiscally prudent as possible.
The one thing to remember with that building is it's not going to be a net gain to the district as far as the facility itself or the infrastructure operations or the utility operations. It's mostly going to be, it's probably going to be mostly administration and staff, and probably heavier on the administration side because that would be new administrators where the staff would be separated into that new building.
Yeah.
So
if we could have a principal at both sites because they're nearby, there's that possibility. But Shannon's smiling and I'm smiling because that is a tough job to be a principal at two different locations.
My biggest concern is then we'll be taking Milliken from 2 elementary schools down
to 1, with a lot of growth that has occurred in the past 20-some years. And as you said, schools build houses, right? People want their kids going, or want to live in a community where their children can go to school. You're taking a school that's still there, and it essentially will be sitting vacant, is what's going to happen. And what does that appear to look like? I mean, I can tell you what it looks like.
I personally don't believe it will. I think maybe at most for half a season, half a year. I think.
Well, that's what we're asking.
Right. I mean, and I can't personally say. I mean, we have a lot of data that points in the direction. I mean, we know we're over capacity right now in elementary school space in Milliken. That's why we have kids that are being bused out of the community.
Which says that Milliken
needs another school.
Right, and so that's why I say I think in order to, by the time because I think we're planning on having a December move out in that building, which is kind of weird. I believe that it'll be that spring that it'll be empty, and we will be making plans to bring elementary kids into that building that fall. I do, just because we could do it right now because we are over capacity in this town.
Exactly.
What year would that be?
We're over capacity. Yeah, we're not quite,
but we would hit the number that Karen is talking about by 27 or 28. Now, obviously, if we wanted to stick to that kind of a schedule, this interest rate situation is going to affect bond success. So in Douglas County and in Lewis Palmer's mill, we've had a lot of people working in the development business, finance, insurance, real estate, and those communities say the reason that the bond failed was because so many people were feeling the effects of the interest rate issue. And I think if we emerge from that in 24, and then we have a bond election associated with that, It takes a couple of years to build a school, and that gets us to 26. Then we get into that sweet spot where the operating budget that Karen is talking about would be justified. And I could see us back in Milliken Middle School, running a robust elementary program. Certainly by then, with some improvements to the building, there could be bond-funded improvements to make it state of the art. But if we just wanted to move into it now, the architects and engineers are telling me there's no reason why we couldn't use it after we vacated as a middle school. So it's just all about how you want to twist that knob from an operational cost standpoint and what the district can bear and what makes sense for the community. Now, I will say that having been somebody who has deactivated a significant number of school facilities and put them in stasis, that in a small town environment, if you have maybe some presence in the building from school district operations or administration, sometimes you can have people keep an eye on everything in concert with the police force and keep stuff from being vandalized. And I've seen other communities neglect schools that were in stasis, and kids got into them and destroyed them. So that can go either way. It just depends upon the amount of care that you put into keeping a building in stasis if you plan to wait before you bring another operating budget back online. Now, an operating budget for a school like that can be another $850,000 a year. So that's not a trivial amount of money, and that's why Karen, being the grown-up who has to write all the checks over there, is sitting there saying, I want to make sure that that works for us when we decide to reactivate that building, because we want all children to have a win from that school coming back online at an appropriate time. That's the kind of thinking that I see over and over and over again in the 200 school districts that I've worked for, where they bring a school back online. They want to make sure they can do it when they can really afford to do it.
Let me see if I'm understanding what I'm hearing. You're saying that you're planning on basically eliminating Milliken Middle School as a school for a period of time. But we're over capacity in a bunch of the other schools, so we're going to have this school building sitting here, empty, not being used, but we're going to go out for a bond issue so we can build more schools somewhere else. Now, am I understanding what I'm hearing?
Well, I don't know what the district's going to do. They're still thinking about what they're going to do. So, but the issue would be that we could use bond funding to add value to Milliken Middle School and make it a better elementary school when we do reactivate it. So that would give us the opportunity to put a renovated school back online here, which I would really love to see us do. Have the existing school that's going to have a state-of-the-art renovation and the existing Milliken Elementary, and then Milliken Middle would come back as a renovated elementary as well if we're able to financially cover that in a bond issue.
Well, if I remember the plans that were put forth when the bond issue came through, plans were to tear down about half of the Milliken Middle School and extend it out into the football field and turning a whole bunch of what now are existing classrooms into a playground or something.
Mm-hmm. That's called
somebody is not thinking correctly.
That's called the do-si-do. That's how all schools that are replaced while they're operational or when they're trying to be preserved are rebuilt. You take the part that you want to rebuild, you tear that down, you build a new part on the playground, and then you create the old area, turn the old area back into the playground. So Orchard Mesa Middle School in Grand Junction, worn out school, 58 years old, playground next to it. We built the new school on the playground while we were running the old school, and then we got the new school operational, and then we tore down the old school and rebuilt the playground where the old school was. That's kind of the standard way that you rebuild a school on its existing site. So it kind of sounds ludicrous, but let's say you were going to rebuild your house and you owned a lot that had been in your family forever, and you wanted to stay on the lot, and you had a huge backyard and you still want to live in the house, well, build the house in the backyard and then tear down the old house and make that your new front yard. So that's kind of standard operating procedure for school districts that rebuild on an existing site. Is they build on the playground, then they knock the old building down and build the playground.
There isn't a playground there now. What there is classrooms that aren't really that old. They might be maybe 40 years old.
There's some new sections to that building and some older sections.
Yeah.
And I think they were looking at trying to keep the newer section operational, if I'm remembering correct.
Yeah.
And then
Taking the older area that's kind of dilapidated, and then doing what he said, adding on to in the football field area, especially if it was going to become an elementary school.
The dilapidated portion must be where the gym is, because that was the existing from the old school.
Just a little bit south of that, Linda, so where where the library and the old courtyard was,
Yeah.
and those classroom wings there, that would be the portion that would come down. So basically, from the old cafeteria, the commons area, that would remain. Everything to the north of that, so the old gym, the new gym, some of those new classrooms that were built on the northeast side, that would all remain and kind of flow into that new building.
So,
And that on the south side that isn't all that old would be torn down.
That would be the part that would be torn down. That's
Yeah,
what we.
and as I'm saying, that makes no sense whatsoever. To take money and an existing building that is operational and tear it down so you can build something new and fancy.
So that's the part that the roof is falling in on.
But then replace the roof.
We've done it three
Replace
times.
it decently. If you do it right, it won't be a problem.
So I think big picture, I mean, obviously, so somehow, one way or another, repurposing Milliken Middle into the next elementary is what we're looking at doing. And because that's where we're gonna have the capacity issues next, we think is,
That's where we have the capacity issues now.
Yeah, well, we're not at capacity yet across the district, because Pioneer Ridge is actually under capacity right now. So,
that capacity.
no, I know it is, but that's how we're getting away with it. Yeah, that's how we're getting away with it, is we have, we have places that are actually a little bit under capacity, so that's how we're balancing the equation now. But, moving forward, that's not ultimately the solution. So that's what we'll do. Now, whether that's, whether the numbers are there to support that fall of 2025 or 2026, I'm not sure, but it's going to be somewhere in that time frame. Is when I would expect we start using the building in that way.
And if we need to use Milliken Middle School for a classroom, we will. Well, Milliken Elementary School, you should see that building now. In that, we are doing complete renovations while there's instruction going on during construction. And so 1/3 of the construction is done, and it's the first grades and some other grade levels that have moved into their new classrooms, while other teachers have moved, so they are working now on the south wing, and give me a call and I'll take you through it sometime, okay?
I'd love it.
Okay. And now,
Are we still working on the playground there at Milliken Elementary? I'm sorry.
the preschool playground, they're working on that. Josh pulled up whatever I don't want to call them tiles, but that's what I'm going to call them, that rubberized stuff.
Yeah.
And that's in the plans. There's some things they won't do in the winter.
Okay, so they're just kind of old and on the winter. And did we get drainage problems figured out over there?
I was going to ask you that.
Well, I don't think we've heard back we did meet with Josh and I forget
The other gentleman's name. And our engineer actually gave them some suggestions, but we haven't heard back from them that I know of.
Was favorable on how we were moving forward, but I haven't gotten the latest update.
Yeah, I think, Pepper, have you heard back from them? No? So perhaps I need to reach out to Josh and see if they've decided on anything yet.
To come back to your point, I just moved out of a house that was 115 years old. And the people I sold it to came in during a visit with their architect and said, we're going to tear that down, we're going to bust that out, we're going to haul that away.
Anything that is old has to cannot do what they do in Europe and other countries. Because if it is old, it's worthless, and we have to tear it down and eliminate it.
But I understand how you feel about that, because I kind of recently went through the same thing. The problem with a lot of these places that were institutional buildings built in the 60s, they're just expensive to operate. A lot of them have hazardous materials in them. And the cost to replace them and upgrade them and make them safe and maintainable is more than it would cost to just replace the facility. And that's what we see all over Colorado now with the school replacement movement, is that a lot of those buildings that were built in the 50s and 60s have gotten to the point where these maintenance folks are just pulling their hair out because of what it costs to keep them operational. And now, after just the last 8 to 10 years, we've gotten to the point where we've started replacing buildings. And I think that the state's going to be better as a result of that, because we've just suffered through the maintenance costs of some of those buildings that were built in the 50s and the 60s. And, you know, a lot of them were pretty buildings, but, you know, they're not Grand Central Station. And so a lot of districts kind of resisted that for a long time and kind of finally came around to the idea that, yeah, we need to build something that's safer, more maintainable, more contemporary, and so we've seen that. We're replacing Grand Junction High School right now. There were 3 replacements in Boulder, 2 replacements in Fort Collins, a couple of replacements in Loveland. I'm thinking down in Colorado Springs, we've replaced 4 schools.
I was just up in Eaton today.
Yeah.
The president, they've got 2 replacements.
Yeah, 2 replacements in Eaton, of all places. So.
But they were all, Thompson, Tomball, that, you know, a lot of these buildings were built same time, same architects, same construction firms, and they're, you know, it's interesting when you talk to them, because the problems that they have in those buildings are, you can just change the name of the building at the top and you'd have the same problems, and it's.
Think about Ledford.
Yeah.
And how that building just kind of collapsed on its own after flooding and stuff.
It collapsed on its own because the maintenance wasn't taken care of when it should have been taken care of.
Which is the same problem at MMS.
Exactly.
So we're trying to fix
So if you spend a whole bunch of money to build a brand new one instead of taking care of what you got.
I wish we had taken care of what we got, but it wasn't done.
So in circling back to cash in lieu of fee, so we're looking at $3.4 million for Brett Hall's next subdivision. Pheasant Hills is the name of it, about 1,300 homes.
Or he could donate land.
And he's already talked about donating land.
Whichever he chooses.
Yeah. So I think this is something we'd have to take under advisement, definitely talk to Brett Hall. I don't see another school being actually built outside of Milliken Middle School for a while. They're in Milliken, and our cash in lieu agreement does say that the money needs to be spent here. So.
Well, these are long-term projects.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we save the money. So the money we collect, we save, so that when we do it, because honestly, when we get there, it's going to be even more expensive than it is now. All the prep fees and everything, it's only going to get more expensive. So that's why we've adopted the way we handle this money.
I was buying school land in El Paso County for $7,000 an acre when I first started doing this.
Yeah.
Cannot believe that. Bought a school site for $7,000 an acre. School board president's hand trembled when she signed the check. It was, you know, just now it's like $80,000 for cornfield now. It's just, land has gone just astronomical.
What's the capacity at Elwell and Pioneer Ridge?
The capacity? I would have to look that up and I will get back.
I think Elwell is about 650.
Yeah.
And Pioneer Ridge is
Well, there's a bit on
625.
Yeah, I think it's closer to that. It's closer to that 650 because I know there's a.
We're beginning to run out of time.
And anybody wants to see Milliken Elementary tomorrow after school, 3:40. I think the traffic will be gone.
Okay.
I'll be there.
All right, just have a couple of quick questions about the high school. When we went out for the bond, I was under the impression the high school would cost $8 million, it's costing $107 million. That's kind of eyebrow raising. You guys had to build a slurry wall. Did that get built all the way around the school for the water problem? Can you?
I don't know how it was built, but I talked to RLH on it, and it was covered under the contingency that they build for things like that.
Okay, because I know slurry walls are expensive. So this brings to my actual question. Hold on to my pen. So you build a slurry wall around the school. We talked in the long-range task force that the high school was expandable. You could add on to it. If you've got a slurry wall around there under the ground,
I'll find out for
do
you.
you have to tear that down?
I have not a clue.
Okay. Just curious about that too.
So the high school currently is built, the new capacity is 13, 15, but they can stretch that to about 1,500 students. There is plenty of room in the new high school that's being built to handle the growth, some of the growth that's coming our way.
That was the next thing, is because I was quite surprised when Shannon said we're going to be at capacity in 3 years. It's like, that doesn't seem, so we'll actually be able to go to 1,500.
That's what they're telling us.
Yeah, and with that block schedule, which is, I was over at the high school Monday with David Benson, the principal, and he said, "Hey, do you want me to give you and the board an explanation of how the block scheduling works?" I said, "Yes, please," because I don't think anybody understands it but him. But as part of that, some of the students, especially the upperclassmen who are doing the dual enrollment, will actually be out of the building at certain times. So that we do have that flexible capacity, so it can handle the 1,500 students, because not all 1,500 will be in the building at the same time.
Gotcha. Okay. That answers my question there. Other questions from the board? We're going to start our meeting a little late.
How many kids from Milliken are going to Pioneer Ridge then, I assume? That's where they're going.
I will give you an accurate count, but I think it's around 60-ish.
That's what I remember too, about 60.
Yeah.
So if they were all in Milliken, we'd actually be at about 680 then. Is that right? Didn't you say Milliken is 620?
Yeah, if we had those 60-some kids back, what would be the capacity?
What would be the enrollment?
Enrollment.
We know it's over
Enrollment at Milliken, I will get you unless you've got it on yours.
I don't have it right.
But you got the new modulars too, right? That adds capacity with new modulars.
That's for the construction.
It's for construction, they're not gonna stay.
Oh, those aren't gonna stay. Oh, well,
Because they're building the building.
Not
so they
all,
have to
yeah.
move.
Some of them we would like to give to someone, but so far we don't have any takers.
okay.
So, like
What
what
you'll
really
see around that corner better once it's all done, we're gonna go away and we'll open it back up. And really pushes that school right out to the intersection. It's odd.
And I mean, that's the kind of thing then you understand about, like, why, because a lot of people say, why do you need so much space now to build an elementary school? But it's for that reason that, if we ever want to grow it, I mean, we really can't do a whole lot of growth on that site unless we start getting into the play areas, and we don't want to do that. I mean, that's no existence for an elementary school kid to live for that outdoor time.
Recess was the best.
Right?
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for